Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be going through the cold and dark startup procedure of the PMDG Boeing 737-700. Now one thing I will say is depending on the company you're flying for, finger quotes because most of us are just enthusiasts, it's going to change some of these rules. So we're going to kind of go through it. I've got the checklist that I like to use. I'm going to post that in the comments below for you to be able to jump in. So let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, we're sitting here. The airplane is completely dead. Honestly, I like to open the window and go, of course, it's the summertime for me right now, so it's, oh boy, it's getting a little humid, but that's all right. So we're inside the plane. Now we're just going to go through the pre-flight checklist, and we're just basically going to make our way right through. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set the parking brake. You got this little handy switch. Click. You're going to go set that one. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to jump up to our heads. I'm going to go ahead and press Control 6, and you're going to pop up here, and you have this lovely thing that says battery. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. As soon as you do that, it freaks out. Next thing you want to do is you want to make sure the standby power guard is closed. This is a really handy thing. You can actually flip on your emergency power. I can actually turn on certain systems off the battery. Dangerous. Be careful. So we're going to leave that on standby mode. And again, just close that sucker right now and you'll be good to go. So normally what we do is we have the two fuel pumps. This is one of those things that they recommend turning on right away. We do have fuel in the middle, so I'm going to click both of those on real quick. What they'll do is we're going to turn on the left fuel pump here, and we're also going to turn on the left aft fuel pump right here. The reason these are going to get turned on is because the APU requires fuel from the left side. So we're going to do that. Next, what we're going to do is, speaking of the APU, we're going to pop over here. I've got my APU. I'm going to click it once. You're going to click it once to the start button. This thing's going to do a little a little wiggle. That's a technical term, by the way. It's going to do this little wiggle, and it's going to just give you a heads up that it's starting to build up some RPM. Once it builds up into RPM, it's going to go give you a little warning here, and things going to go, and it's going to start speeding up pretty much right away. When this is running, one thing that I like to do is I like to kind of look over my head real quickly and just double check to make sure my switches aren't like in dumb places, like I'm about to overload the darn thing as soon as we get started kind of a deal. And everything, again, just faults to a good spot. One thing I notice is my emergency exit lights are not closed. We'll deal with this in a minute. The other thing I notice is coming down here, you got a bunch of my lights are not on. But again, I'm just waiting for that APU to kick on. And what'll happen is you'll get a low pressure light will suddenly go off on this particular one. By the way, make sure crossfeed is closed. I'll give it just a few moments to kind of come in. APU generator, you're going to get a little warning. It's going to say APU off bus. It's going to appear right here, just reminding us, hey, by the way, that little auxiliary power unit that you need to power the rest of the plane, you shall probably connect me. Otherwise, I'm just going to waste fuel. There it goes. Click. Click. Now notice, ta-da! See how the two fuel pressure lights went out because they're actually working properly now. All right, cool. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our position lights. You can do strobe and steady. I'm a fan of steady. This is the universal sign for, hey, I'm running my hydraulic pumps. Right now, I'm not running my hydraulic pumps. If you were to click the switch right here. Hear it? Yeah, it's back there. Don't forget your hydraulic pumps, by the way. All right, so logo lights, if required. It's not nighttime. My company doesn't require it. Cabin lights, if required. This is a good time to go ahead and call them up and say, hey, could you turn on the cabin lights? Or again, in my case, could you please make me some tea? We want to go ahead and double check to make sure the emergency exit lights are closed. That's the switch here. Go, and now they're nice and armed and ready to rock. We're going to go ahead and make sure that the passenger signs are on. This is such a satisfying sound. Woo! And you may not move about the cabin. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and turn on the packs. The packs are these giant air conditioner / heater all-in-one thingamajiggies. The way we do this is we go click, and we go click, and then it turns them on. What should happen, though, is you'll notice this needle will shoot. Why did it not shoot? It's because there's no air being pushed into it. So we actually have to open up the APU bleed, which I'm kind of surprised that it starts closed, but I'm okay with that. As soon as we do that, you're going to notice the supply duct temperature is going to start shifting. Like if I go to the passenger cabin, see how it's about 72 degrees. If that's not enough, I can go ahead down here and actually change those temperatures directly. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go above our heads. This is going to be the Control 7. Up top, we have our two INS. These are little gyros. We're going to click both. And we're just going to snap them to nav mode. They're going to yell at us saying, hey, I'm on DC. This is actually how they test themselves. If you're really, really nervous about it, what you can actually do is you can come up here to the oh my God, who set the brightness on this one? There'll be a little status display. Oh, there it goes. And it basically will start counting down to let you know just how long it's going to take to load. I have it on fast mode, so this is super duper 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 quick, so I do not need to worry about that as much. So next what we're going to do is we're going to go pop down to the FMC, and this is when we set up our FMC. The FMC I'm just going to do very, 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 very quickly. I'm basically going to cheat here. Again, I'm not doing anything sophisticated. I got a separate video on that explains all the good stuff that I'm about to do here. I'm just keeping it very, very, very quick. Again, I'm not doing anything sophisticated. Whoa, swing and a miss, swing and a miss. I'm just setting it up basically so that we're ready to go. Like I said, separate video. We'll go to PVD, and we'll go ahead and do this by ORW. Sounds good to me. That sounds good. Activate, execute. We're going to do departure arrival. We're going to be departing via the Bradley 6, and we're going to do runway 6, which is right around the corner. Departure arrival, we're going to be arriving via ILS for 5. We're going to go by Lafay, press execute, go to legs. We're going to delete up this, whoop, discontinuity. Go away, discontinuity. Nobody likes you. Looks good, looks good, looks good. And my programming is correct. Ooh, you probably want to delete that one too, otherwise it's going to give you some issues. Cool. Back to work, we did performance initiation. We're going to grab our 0 fuel weight. We're going to do, and our total weight here is going to be 5.6. Cost index is going to be 500. We're going to do cruise altitude 11,000. Like I said, I covered this in the video, so don't worry about it. That's good. And we're going to come over here. We're going to do, obviously, the bump takeoff because my fuel is free. Not good for the engines, by the way. We're going to take flaps 1, because why not? Center of gravity is going to be 5.99. Click, click, click. And then we're going to come over here and we're going to set this. One thing that is not in that little checklist that I've provided down below is it doesn't tell you about this step until much later. So I'm a fan of doing it now because this is the time when you get it done. All I'm doing is I'm setting the trim that says 5.99 at the top center of the screen, and I'm dialing it on that little display in the bottom right corner of the screen as close as I can. Sweet. All right, back to work. All right, so FMC is good. So now this is when you go ahead and call up your VAT sims and stuff and say, hey, can I get a flight plan clearance? And they'll call you back and say, yeah, sure, proceed by, It's like, thanks, appreciate that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to set up our transponder, control 4. Whoop. And then our transponder is this little magic box right here. It's exactly the same as you're probably familiar with. Everybody's a little different. If, for example, I were flying 1200, perfect. And then we go ahead and say TARA, which now means I get TCAS, so I can see what everybody else is doing. While I'm over here, I always like to check my rudder trim and make sure that's okay. So now what we're going to do is that's been set. We're going to set up the MCP, which is the Master Control Program. That's going to be in the middle. So what I like to do is I like to set my V2 speed here, and I like to set my initial altitude here, and I like to set the runway heading here. So we're going to be taking off runway 6, which where I am, it's not quite 6. It's actually 57 degrees, which close enough. My V2 speed is going to be this speed right here. It's a 144. This is kind of my initial going up speed, as I like to say. My initial altitude, if we're doing the Bradley, will be 4,000 feet. Again, I'm just setting this up by now. Again, these are basic things we're going to need to change later on anyway, but we can at least get this stuff set up. All right, let's see. Heading, takeoff, runway set, IS max set. Let's see, initial altitude set. Yaw damper up. Whoa. Yaw damper is the switch right here. Don't leave that off. It'll annoy you. You'll know what I mean. Window heat's going to be set on. This is usually something I wait until the plane's a little bit more warm. Like I said, the engines are running before I hit the window heat, but they recommend doing it a little bit sooner in this particular case. One thing we have to set is our flight altitude. Now, get this one wrong, and you'll get a very angry warning later on. We're also going to set our landing altitude, which is 200 feet. In the old days, they told you to do like 50 feet more, 50 feet less. Just make sure it's on this one. And if you need to do it manually, again, this is the pressurization control here. If it gives you issues, you can pop that button right there. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and set up our flight directors. So we're going to go back to our default view. Flight directors, I got a switch right here. You can do flight directors on both sides. You can do flight directors on one side. It is totally up to you how you want to have that set up. It doesn't matter. Minimums, they recommend setting up the minimums now. I find this a little early to do it, but if you need to change the minimums, you can come right over here. Also, if you need to switch to a barometric versus radar, you can set the radio minimums right here. Obviously, these are 50-foot radio minimums. I want 200-foot radio minimums. Not 200 feet above sea level. Click, click. Okay, now we have 200 feet above ground level minimums if you need to set those up now. Usually what they do is they say push LNAV, VNAV. Don't do that. Just wait until later. We're going to set our altimeters. The altimeters are set. You can just press the B and the D key. It gets that going for you. Altimeters ret, auto brake. They say switch it over to RTO, which just means rejected takeoff. Be careful with your throttle when you do this because you'll accidentally trigger this brake if you pull your throttle. If you push your throttle too far and pull it back, it freaks out on you. So just kind of keep that in mind. I think it's a little early to put that one on, but like I said, I'm just going to the checklist that I located. All right, close doors. Let's do it. So we're going to come down here. We're going to go ahead and close some doors real fast. We're going to go to Flight Sim Actions. We're going to go to Doors, close up the entry door. You folks don't need to be there anymore. Press Return. Let's actually confirm that the back door is closed already. This looks good. I'm going to go up to my ground maintenance, ground services, and I'm just going to confirm that everything's off. We don't need that one anymore. I'm going to remove the chocks. Remember, we already have the parking brake set. This is done. This is done. This is done. That looks lovely. Let's go back up here, and we're good. And then we're going to go ahead and get this thing started. Now, one thing I don't understand is I would not arm the auto throttle until you're short of the runway, so I disagree with them on that particular point. But we can get everything else going here. So I'm going to pop up top. I'm going to go ahead and pop on all my fuel pumps that have fuel in them. If they don't have fuel, don't bother turning them on. We're going to go and pop over to the electric hydraulic pumps. We're going to pop those too. We're going to get the low pressure. You'll hear a little sound. Yeah, you can just about hear it. Parking brake is set, which we did. Ground equipment's good. Engine area is good. We're ready to do this before start checklist. So now we're ready to get things started. It takes just a minute. So what we do is we come... So what I like to do is I like to press Control 5 because it kind of gives me like a view this way. So what we want to do is we want to make sure this screen is set to engine. So to do that, we press the ENG. You can pop it a couple times and get like all the different details right here. But this is fine, and we're going to be interested in this number right here. So this is how it works. Pretty straightforward. We look up above our head, see this little switch that says grid, off, cont, and flit. This simply says start on the ground, don't start. Run the spark, and try to start it in the air. So what I'm going to do is anti-collision light comes on. This would be the bacon light. And we start the second left switch first. Now, another thing people will do differently, and again, depending on your company, is they'll use the left igniter on even days, and they'll do like the right igniter on odd days, or vice versa. If you want to leave it on both, nothing bad is going to happen. This is just, again, depends on your company here. So let's go ahead and start. I'm sticking the number two fingers up, and I'm twisting my now hand around. Click grid. And now we can just go right back to control. We'll go back to control 5. So what are we looking for? We're looking to see that this number gets bigger. Notice this number is not getting bigger. That's because they forgot to warn us about another really important component. So I'm going to go shut this off. And you'll notice that, remember how we were running those air conditioners a while ago? Guess what? All the air for those is going into these air conditioners right now. So unfortunately for us, they ignored that step. Either that or I missed the step, but I have a tough time believing that I missed that one before I did it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the isolation valve to auto, shut the packs off. If you don't have the packs on, you'll have enough pressure to actually start the engine. So like I said, this checklist does miss a couple of details, which is unfortunate. No harm done, though. Grid, and now we'll go back to control 5. And now what's going to happen is you're immediately going to see that this is the N2, this is the little turbine inside the engine, little compressor, is going to immediately start spinning. This is the percentage of max RPM. What you want to do, by the way, make sure your throttle's back, is you're waiting for this number to get to 25, which is 25% of its maximum speed. Once it gets to that number, you're going to click this switch, which is going to send fuel to the engine. There's 24, 25, click. So what should happen now is you should immediately get light off, which will be indicated by this number. You'll also get a rise of N1, which is the giant fan blade up in basically the front. This would be the front half of the engine, or the front third of the engine is another way. This will stabilize at about 20%, given depending on what the air temperature is. Obviously, colder days, this is going to be different, and this number is going to be different. But the important thing to watch out for is, indeed, you have fuel flowing, you do have temperature, and if you listen, you can hear the engine happily warming up, and this number is increasing on its own. So it is one of those things you want to kind of keep an eye out for. So what we're going to do is we're just going to wait for that to spin up. It'll pop up. Whoop. I thought I pressed the F key. There it is. Nice. So all the warning lights are going to pop out, and you're going to stabilize at about 20%, 21. Again, it depends on the outside air temperatures where it's going to die. What will happen next is this little guy right here will pop back down, and I'll tell you that it's done starting. If you want to at this point, you can pop the generator onto that bus. Remember, this aircraft has two separate buses. You have like a left and you have a right one. Well, sort of a left and a right. Just keep that in mind. So what we want to do, though, is we want to confirm that we do have pressure. Don't turn the air conditionings on. That would be silly. You're also going to get this dual beat warning, which basically means you're pulling and pushing air out of the same thing at the same time. Not the best thing to do, but it's not going to hurt anything. So I'm going to hold the number 1 with my finger, and I'm going to twist my finger around. I'm going to set it to start. Again, I'm going to tap Control 5, and it's going to bring me to this view. This engine will start a little quicker. Off it goes. So I'm going to take my hand and pop it right on the engine start switch. We don't get those new fancy modern switches. We get like the 1950s switches here, which is, in my opinion, the cool ones. But again, it's my opinion. So what we're going to do is we're going to wait for this to boost up. It's 23, and it's going to go to 25, and I'm so quick with that finger. All right, so we should get an EGT. We should also get a fuel flow. The fuel flow takes a second. There it goes. Wow, that's a ton. That's 1.4 tons of fuel per hour. I'm sorry, 1.4 thousand pounds of fuel per hour, which is quite a bit of fuel. So that's going to start running that sucker up. And now we're going to get ready for everything else that's going to come afterwards. We just let it go, and nice and relaxing. Again, these things start so fast compared to some of their older brethren. That was the best way I'm going to kind of say it there. Like, the 737-100s and 200s, or like the old 707s. Believe it or not, there was a 737 that had an engineer seat that sat right here, which, wow, that blows my mind just a tiny bit. Anybody want a jump seat? Oh yeah, that looks comfortable. I just think it's a great detail. All right, when both engines are started, you're good to go. I'm going to press Control 6. One thing you want to do is make sure these are both off. Don't try to start both at the same time. It doesn't work. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go through the before taxi checklist. So we're going to go ahead and pop both of those on like this. And you can see it's going to tell me the APU generator is off bus. The reason it's off the bus is because it's still running. Now, your company may require that you leave the APU on for a little while before shutting it down. I'm not going to worry about it. So we're going to do a probe heat needs to be turned on. That's these two switches here. Go ahead and pop those two. We're going to turn the packs back to the auto mode, which is going to do is going to start cooling the airplane back down. You can see we start picking up a little bit of temperature here. We're also going to set the isolation valve to the auto setting, which we did. We're going to shut the APU bleed off. We no longer need this. The engines are providing us with compressed air now. We're going to take the two engine start switches. Now, what I do is before takeoff, I set them to cont. I disagree with this step on this participant's checklist, but again, whatever your company says is what you want to be doing anyway. APU gets shut off now, so we go click, and what will happen is it'll pop off. Obviously, make sure your 2 generators have been engaged. Don't accidentally, because that would be very embarrassing. Everything goes click and shuts back off, and you're like, "Aw." Keep that in mind as well. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to set the flaps for takeoff. If you remember a while ago when we were doing a little setup here, we said we're going to use 1 degree of flaps. Chew. Nice. Keep in mind, if you are in icy conditions or there's water and it's cold outside, you're not supposed to put the flaps down until you get to the runway. The reason that you do this is, again, you don't want things frozen and get stuck and preventing the flaps from smoothly moving later. It's better to have a locked up flap when you put it down than when you try to put it up, as you can probably imagine. Elevator trim, this is when they tell you to set it for takeoff. Remember how I did it? Oh, hello. Turns out they do give you a number. What did I say, 606? It says 5.99. Oh, I'm now good at there it is. Now it's perfect. Sweet. So we're going to go ahead in the flight controls. We always like to give them a wiggle. So the easiest way to do this is if you go to the sys page, see how you can actually see exactly what the controls are doing. So you can actually check that directly. I'm not going to play with the rudder. I don't have them connected at the moment, so I can't do that. Next thing we do is we press the recall button. We don't have a recall button. What you do instead is see this big thing right here. Click this. And if any of the lights stay on, that means something bad happens. So you go tap it a couple of times. Do you see how if I let go, everything stays off? That means there's no emergencies that we're experiencing at this time. Later on, we have a display unit on the bottom. Some people like to shut that off. I don't know. I'm old-fashioned. I like to put it on ENG mode. If you're not that kind of person, that's fine. You can actually come over here and you can change it. You can switch it to nav display. Again, it's totally up to you. You can also do engine primary in case that screen fails or something like that. Do whatever works for you. It doesn't make that much of a difference. The airplane's going to fly just fine. And the last thing we like to do is we like to stick our head up. We like to go ahead and pop. Whoa, not start the APO because, the switch is right there. We're going to turn on the taxi light, and also you can turn on the runway turnoffs if you need them. Pop, 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 and now we are on our way. So that concludes this tutorial. Like I said, it's just a quick video. The folks over at PMDG have their own variation. This is kind of the way I've done it for as long as I have flown aircraft like this one in simulators. Obviously, your company is going to dictate what's different. In the real world, for example, these circuit breakers actually matter. You have to turn certain ones on and off all the time. Ooh, who's this guy right here? Who's this? Auto speed brake. Yeah, that seems safe. Yeah, let's go ahead and leave the circuit breaker on for that one. Keep in mind there are other things we need to set up. We didn't get ATIS. We didn't get approval. We didn't play with the HGS system. We didn't set a lot of our navigation radios. You can see we're on data. We didn't do our HF radio. We didn't set up our cell cal. We didn't check the weather. None of that. This was just about getting the airplane started. And remember, there's a couple things that differed from the list, namely the auto throttle. Anything that controls your engines, you don't really like to touch until you get to the runway. I think that's kind of just a general thing, whether that's the continuous ignition or, like I said, was the flaps, or it's going to be the auto throttle. But again, do what works for you. And like I said, we've got a nice, happily started airplane. Our flight plan is ready to go, and it's just a matter of heading out to the runway. But other than that, enjoy.